Okay, welcome so much for being here, all of you. It looks amazing from here, and we are also happy that we can be here because it's so crucial. We talk about Europe these days. Europe, its peace and its tranquility. The sound is working, that's great.
Turn the sound down.
Yeah. Its peace and tranquility. We all take it for granted and as a given, but these days, many also feel indifferent about it or even hostile against it. And Europe as a continent is very natural to us, right? It is the project of integration, the further collaboration now in the form of the European Union that is something that we need to carry together. And as we all know, Europe is not Brussels. Europe is the faces of people that live in Europe. It's 700 million people. It's 23 languages, official language, and 60 indigenous languages. It is glaciers and volcano islands and beaches, to name just a few things. And the European Union gives us this opportunity to call a whole continent something which would otherwise be much smaller, our home. And this is what we would like to talk about today. We are not politicians discussing about Europe, but we believe it is time for artists, the creative minds, thinkers and philosophers to enter into the discourse about Europe and the betterment of the EU. And now I have the big honor to introduce or to present our main impulse for this session, which comes, of course, from Wolfgang Tillmans. As you all know, a very acclaimed artist and winner of the Turner Prize. And his work is so many layered, of very broad variety, that we can obviously not cover here. But he's driven by the big questions, by truth, by beauty, friendship, freedom. And also his personal history is very connected to the topic we are covering today, because he's lived in London for more than 20 years. And recently he's become very active in political campaigns, always in combination with arts and culture. There was a campaign for the elections in Germany and an anti-Brexit campaign, and he's here now today to present his new campaign and talk about his motivation also. And I'm very happy you are here, and please, Wolfgang.
Thank you, thank you. So the most important thing is that I don't want this to be my campaign, because I was becoming an activist by accident. It was an emergency that in 2016 pushed me over the edge to become an activist rather than the politically interested and politically engaged artist who I had always been. For example, the first reportage that I made in 1991 with ID magazine was about the techno scene in Ghent, Frankfurt and London, and we called it Techno is the Sound of Europe. And the whole magazine was called European Electronic Community, EEC. So I come from such a Euro excited times that 25 years later I couldn't believe what was going on in my chosen home of London and Britain, and I started a campaign against Brexit pretty much all on my own. Then for the German Parliament Bundestags elections 2017, again there was the impulse to try to do something together, but in the end it was pretty much coming all out of my studio. And then there was somehow on the horizon, I always knew that the European elections would be the crucial one, and I wanted to do something. Thank God there existed also some other people in Europe who wanted to bring together European enthusiasts and cultural workers. Yoeri Albrecht, organizer of the Forum on European Culture, then invited Rem Koolhaas and myself to work on, to present sort of our simultaneous idea of an open call for ideas to communicate Europe better, which we called Eurolab, and it took place pretty much a year ago in Amsterdam, and it wasn't a straightforward route from there. A lot of the energy that happens in these places, in these moments, are difficult to preserve and carry on. And so, in the end, maybe there again was a little bit too little time, but in the beginning of this year, a smaller group of people, we from different countries, the UK, the Netherlands, France, Poland, Germany, came together to forge this campaign called Vote Together. Funded by the foundation Between Bridges, and we identified the date, which you've seen. We've identified the languages, 24 languages that Europe officially has. It has more, as you just mentioned, and wanted to base this campaign not so much on one person's visual language, but on the beauty of the language and poetry of the language. And so it's a campaign that is driven, trying to drive voter turnout, because in the end that is the one single thing that matters. Brexit would not have happened if young people would have come out. Trump would have not happened if young and minority people would have come out. It's always the same story in every country. And does this play? Oh, yeah. And so there are, like in other campaigns, this is a multimedia campaign. On the one hand, there are posters for people to self-print, to download, and we've done them, in this case, in 24 languages, as you can see here as a video. What turned out to be such a powerful thing in the Brexit campaign was T-shirts, which we had sent out to people, to opinion leaders, and it worked as a billboard, and people posted them on social media. And this time we are working trying to work this on 28 different countries, and we've sent T-shirts out to about 15 of them, and there's a great feedback, and the whole thing is, it's difficult to get things going in more than one country, but the good thing about this is also an election. You cannot turn the heat up 2 months before. You know, it's something that in the end, you turn the heat up until the day until the day of the election. And there is a number of different messages we're trying to give. Factual information, like this one about cleaning up a river, trying to give a very clear, tangible thing that no country can do by itself. The Danube River can only be kept clean by 10 countries working together. If that is a strong reason enough for people to actually go to vote, remains the question. The other approach is, of course, fear and the attack under which we are. And that we should maybe discuss, no, the strategies. Important for us was that we are not just offering short messages, but we also want to direct all the attention that we can gather to the website that gives factual, hard information. And here's the T-shirts. Photographed from Helsinki to Lisbon, from Hungary to the UK, and some of them are also in the merchandise stand of Republica. Mm-hmm. It's just so beautiful, no? Maya, May, you, and other languages obviously have zero connection and familiarity. Mm-hmm. There was initially at Eurolab great excitement from the European Parliament and European Commission press office, which at the time of Brexit I had zero support. They said we cannot at all even almost talk to you. Now they wanted to talk, they were very open, but in the end almost zero collaboration was possible because everything had to go through the usual committees and messages had to be approved by so many. Is this it? Oh no. Committees, etc., that we are working together in sympathy, but unfortunately the content that we provide they cannot or do not want to use. This is another big thing. We made 500 copies of 44 posters, which makes this big wall, and anybody of you who would like to host one of these walls, it's 7.5 meters wide, 3 meters tall. It's a great photo bomb opportunity. We have them ready. 250 have been sent out across all 28 countries of the EU, and let's hope they get put up. And but the whole thing is this is not my campaign, this is not our campaign, this is not for us, this is for all of us, this is for taking part in democracy, because others decide for you if you don't take part in democracy. It's that simple, and let's talk.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. And this is the moment where I would like to introduce the rest of our panel, of course, and then we can enter into the debate. And you've given many impulses already for what we would like to discuss. To my right is Yoeri Albrecht. He's the director of the Cultural Center de Bali, which hosted the Forum on European Culture last year, as Wolfgang mentioned. And their ideas were created for the question of how to rebrand Europe. And we are very curious to learn about that. You are also a founding member of the European Press Prize, and among many other roles, you also serve on the European Board of Advisors at Open Society Foundations. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And next is Henriette Bretton-Meyer. She comes to us from Kunsthal in Copenhagen, where she's a curator. And this year, the CPH Docs also had a strong focus on Europe, and she also curated an art exhibition called Europa Endlos, which featured a number of the most notable artists today, put into context with European topics. So we will be very excited to learn more about this and about your approach. And maybe a hand of applause also for Henriette. And last but not least is Sebastian Stern. He's a Munich-based filmmaker and also winner of the Bavarian Film Prize. He's here today to present his film Babylon, which is part of the Love Europe project by Gabriela Sperl. And you all feel very special tonight, I hope, because this is the pre-premiere of this film. The actual premiere is tomorrow with the German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas, so you will be first to see this film. And we will we will watch the whole film in its total length of approximately 10 minutes at the end of our panel, and I hope you can all stay and watch this film. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Wolfgang, I know in the preparation to this panel, you always mention this is not your campaign, it's our campaign. You don't want to be a one-man show, which is great. I mean, the campaign is amazing. But is it for you, if you could talk about your motivation, or what is the value you would like to protect most? What is your very personal motivation with this?
I don't know, I didn't have a focus in school on history, but I was born in 1968 and I always had a very strong sense of that history that feels very long ago, in fact, is actually not that long ago. For example, when you think about that there were 24 years between 1945 and 1992. It's probably wrong.
1945.
It's 27 years.
Yeah.
But between now and 1992 is also 27 years. So 1992, for many of us, seems like a relatively tangible, close time, whereas the perceived time between the end of Hitler dictatorship and the Summer of Love seems such gigantic potential, not potential, it was actual, factual movement of society. So whatever happened for me, a gay person growing up as a gay man in Germany where homosexuality was legalized in '69, all these things that happened for me, I've always been aware can be reversed. And so I never felt this is secure. You know, I always felt democracy is something that only stays active when it's being used, and Europe as a continent of friends is something that is a relatively new privilege. And nationalism and militarism are almost a default setting, and we've been lucky for many years that they've been not rearing their ugly head, but that they are back now. That drives me. The actual fear.
Yeah.
And the love for you.
And the love. And as an artist, you chose to also, as an artist, be active. Like now you explained your motivation. It's love and fear, and the fear that things might change for the worse. Do you feel that, I mean, for many artists, this is a very difficult subject. Do they get politically involved or not? And this is something that I would like to discuss a little further with everybody. So if they have these hesitations, would you say now is a crucial time that everybody needs to get involved? Or
I get asked this many times, should artists get involved more? And I say every baker and every banker should get involved more. And artists should also get more involved, but you cannot say that every artist is the same and they have the same predisposition to speak or to communicate in a way that can be activist. Or I think we all should get more involved, and I got involved as the private person who I am, as a citizen, and then I used what was at my hands, which was somehow I discovered an ability with words and images and to do this. Everybody, I mean, it's just, we are so embarrassed today. Everybody is embarrassed to actually stick their neck out. We're all okay to talk a little bit in the pub and with friends about politics, but nobody is prepared to go and stand for a city council. Nobody is actually joining parties anymore, and because it's slightly embarrassing. And when I started the anti-Brexit campaign, I realized, you know what, this embarrassment is over because this is an emergency. I have to do this. I want to look into the mirror the 24th of June and feel that I've done everything that I could do. And I think we are now experiencing a world where every one of us has to ask ourselves that question.
Well, it's exactly like Wolfgang says. It's democracy is a verb. It needs to be fed. It needs to be. It should be alive by the bodies of its citizens, every citizen, whether you're a bakery or an artist. The only nice thing about artists is, and that's very important, they unlock creativity and they inspire other people. That's what art is about. But artists are always connected to their times, because good art is connected to its time always. But it's true that a lot of the institutions and a lot of the public underestimates the value of what art can bring to politics and to Europe and to our times. Because we think that big endeavors like the European Union or peace in our continent is made by public servants and economists. But the real content of political endeavors is made by creative thinkers, is made by art and artists. I mean, no nation state in Europe was forged by other things than an imagined community and a narrative, an idea of the nation. So the idea, which is made, it's no coincidence that the cultural institutions of abroad from Germany are called Goethe Institute, and from Spain are called Instituto Cervantes. So it's you know, the identity of the nation comes from the imagination of artists. So the identity of Europe comes from the imagination of artists, of course. And I think what Wolfgang did is just very, very beautiful, because he uses his art to connect to what's happening at this moment, and a good artist is able to do that. And it's of course it's also a way of a citizen, as Wolfgang is, like everybody else, is to engage as a citizen, but it's engaging with your skills, and that's what's I think very inspiring about it.
Totally. I totally agree. But let's explore it a little bit more, because there's in my view, but maybe I'm totally getting it wrong, but there's a part where you say art in itself is the expression of freedom. Basically, the mere act of art is already a statement that you are giving in the context of your time. And then there's obviously some sort of political activism that artists can also do. And my question was a little bit, is this a time where you sort of go beyond that mere expression of freedom? Or is it more like Wolfgang also said, basically every artist does his or her thing?
I think art is always doing that already. Good art is doing that. So you shouldn't ask artists in particular to do something in their free times. You should, on the other hand, as art institutions and as European Union, give space, and ample space, and real space, to the impetus of the artist. So that means money, that means time, that means recognition, that means... I mean, it's an outcry, I would think, that the European Union, with a yearly budget of 1,000 billion euros, has hardly spent anything on art. So they spent half of it on cows and pigs. So if you drive from Berlin to Amsterdam, you cross, by every kilometer, it's the net worth of a big art museum you're passing, because that's what we spend on the cows who are standing there. So, I mean, it has to do with unlocking the space for artists, because artists in itself are already engaged in their time. So it's unfair to say to artists that they should, speak up. I mean, of course, they should, like Wolfgang said, everybody should speak up. Everybody should feel engaged. Everybody should feel a citizen. But artists are not different than that. I think the problem lies much more in the fact that the stage is not set, and also maybe sometimes not taken by artists. But it's also not set for them, because we think that the future is forged by economists and public servants. And that's just not enough. It's cutting out imagination. And I was born in 67. You were born in 68. I mean, l'imagination au pouvoir is still very, very true. It's the 68 sentence for imagination, power to the imagination.
Yeah. Henriette, maybe you want to share some of your insight because that's exactly what you did with current artists, sort of addressing real issues in Europe, like labor, but you can explain yourself maybe.
Sure. You were saying, Yoeri, what can artists do? You can also ask, what can institutions do? What are the means that we have at our hands? I happen to work in Kunsthalle in the center of Copenhagen. It's called Kunsthalle Charlottenborg. We have changing exhibitions, and we believe that part of the institution's mission is to unfold the potential of art in terms of social change. This exhibition, Europa Endlos, that's on at the moment, I curated it, so I selected the artists in it. Some of the artists are working in, let's say, an activist way. Wolfgang Tillmans is also part of the exhibition with some of the former campaigns that he spoke about before. There are artists that have more, let's say, symbolic artworks in the exhibition that are more open. And then again, there are artists in the exhibition that work in a more documentary way, because this was a collaboration with the film festival, Copenhagen Docs, that take place and have their headquarters in our Kunsthalle every year in March. And so we saw that we wanted a joint theme this year that was Europe. It was a burning theme, of course, because of Brexit and also of the European election coming up in May. And in Denmark, we also, on top of that, have the general election coming up before middle of June. And so we wanted to provide a stage, like you call it, Yoeri, a place that you could enter, a place for our audience to come and reflect and think about Europe and many different aspects of Europe and the EU, from directly political things of the EU, but also more widely to what it means to be part of Europe.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah, and Sebastian, as we will see later in your film, it's no propaganda film for the EU. It's merely an observation maybe of daily life, and maybe you can talk a little bit more about the approach that you chose for the film, but also for the project.
Yeah, I was asked to be one of many directors who did this one project together, the Love Europe project, and we were all asked to tell personal stories about our relationship to Europe. And I was wondering what I could contribute to this very interesting project, and I was thinking that I think I really like telling stories that are really in my stomach, and I experienced it on a very deep emotional level, and so I found some childhood memory that was back in the beginning of the 90s when the Iron Curtain, the so-called Iron Curtain, was opened, and I grew up next to the border to Czechoslovakia, and for me it was quite pure, this memory of a feeling that I experienced a border to be opened, and back then I didn't realize maybe the whole political context, although my father explained me about the Cold War and things like that, but deep inside I felt that it was something great that was happening, and the greatness of this memory of an opening border was for me the inspiration to tell the story now back in the 90s.
And this maybe brings us also to the sphere that Wolfgang mentioned, that the sphere we are working in and living in, and also this is the realm of Republica, and the art world maybe in its whole is already a sphere of openness and democracy, and the attacks we are experiences, they come from somewhere else. People that are denying these values that we kind of uphold. So I sort of observed there's two strategies to work with this, but you you all must correct me. So one strategy is to try to get into the discourse with these people and sort of get into conversation with people who voted for Brexit, with people who vote for AfD in Germany. And the other strategy is to basically ignore it and say, but we are more. We are the majority, and we have to sort of speak up about us being the majority and to sort of get everyone involved on this side. And I'm just wondering, where do you see a strategy? Is the strategy in the discourse, and does it lead anywhere? And of course, where's the role of the arts?
I think it's a good question, and I think for a while we tried your second option by ignoring it, and it didn't go away. And that's because I think it's the wrong option. If big parts in a democracy disagree with you and vote differently, and you need to engage, you need to explain, you need to give an alternative, you need to get into discourse. If you don't do that, it just won't go away. It will grow in silence, and it will grow bigger, and it will become very, very dangerous. So if you're not confronting it as artists, and if you don't overcome your shame, like Wolfgang said, it's a bit awkward to. So we did this forum on European culture twice now. We're going to do in a year time a third one, and ask artists from all over Europe to come and show, don't tell. Show, like Wolfgang and Graham Koolhaas did. Show what it is if you get engaged, and if you do. We asked, I just came back from Paris the other day, where we redid one of our happenings we organized at the Forum, which is a collage of Shakespeare, Goethe, Victor Hugo, and modern speeches of Margaret Thatcher, Václav Havel, François Mitterrand, about Europe. And people said, do you think that people are going to listen 70 minutes, 80 minutes to political speeches? And yes, they did, because we asked a great artist, Ivo van Hove, to forge it into a play which is outspokenly pro-European, which tells a European story and quotes Winston Churchill and quotes also Marine Le Pen as a dialogue. But it works. You have to get engaged. I mean, if you think that this is going away by ignoring it, we be in very dire straits in about 10 years' time. And actually, we'll be in dire straits in June, because then the biggest faction in the European Parliament will be the faction of Orban, of Alternative for Deutschland and Geert Wilders. So it's not going to go away. No. And actually, that's what's so beautiful about art, that you can engage. You can.
I mean, the thing is, I recently had an exhibition in Dublin, and I learned a lot about Irish history, and it's so amazing where they have arrived, from where they've come, how terrible it was. So now we have a state of great personal freedom and prosperity for many people in Europe, but and now there are people who don't think it's worth fighting for. But let's not forget, there was a huge regime of lies and lies and lies that was standing in the way of people's personal rights, and people stood up against it and fought it. The Eastern Bloc and lots of good things have happened. So to think that we are now we have to run and we have to duck and we have to hide, no, of course we have to now see that what's going on is the last sort of attempt to hold back the success of history of the last 70 years. But if we are courageous and say we want this Europe, like for example in the UK, the hard right is saying this is Brexit betrayal. But there is no Brexit betrayal, because there was a 52% pro-Brexit vote, but there was certainly not a 52% hard Brexit vote. So there was maybe a 35% hard Brexit vote, but those 35% act as if they are absolutist owners of the truth. And we just have to stand up. We are 87 people who didn't vote AfD. And Alexander Gauland said he wanted his country back. Well, it's not your country. And so on.
Henriette.
But I feel it's also about providing information. And for instance, in my research for the exhibition, I was looking into a lot of EU and thinking about how do you deal with a topic like Europe in a couple of 100 square meters for this exhibition, which you can still see till the middle of August, by the way. But so I ended up, should you include some statistics? Are people fed up with hearing about the EU because of all the Brexit leading up to the opening, or people are actually interested now wanting more? And so that we had a lot of discussions in the exhibition office how to deal with this, because I wanted to also provide some information, but not to be I didn't want it to be a didactic experience, of course. And so one of the things that we did was we published this Charter for Fundamental Rights of the European Union. It's a text, it's a ready-made that you can download from the European Parliament's website in all 24 languages, but we made it into a newspaper. It's a beautiful text, and not many people are aware of it. So that is a freebie to take, for instance, from the exhibition. So sometimes provide some things that are actually under our noses, but that we're not aware of. Was one thing that we did with the exhibition.
Yeah, there's a French writer called Laurent Godet, and he just said that by now there's a disconnect between the longing for Europe and the idea of Europe and a unified Europe, and basically the building of structure, and that this disconnect cannot be basically solved by politics alone. But I think that void can probably be filled with culture and art and our identities. We will have some time for questions and more talking, but now is the time for Sebastian's film, which I announced is one of 9 films as part of the Love Europe project, which premieres tomorrow here in Berlin, and which will be shown in full length also on Arte coming Saturday at 11 p.m. and will be in the Arte Mediathek probably for a couple of days. So I hope you all like it. And the film is around 10 minutes long, and I hope, as I said, you can stay. And we really wanted to give this space to this panel because we are discussing art, so why cut it short? And now I would like to have the film run for us.
We have questions after.
Yes, questions are after. Yeah, we move. You stay, and we move the chairs a little. Okay. Oops, sorry. I'm sorry.
Du musst dir vorstellen, das war alles der eiserne Vorhang. Und dahinter war der Ostblock.
Der Ostblock.
Wir haben die Tschechen dann auch oft an der Grenze getroffen. Das waren genauso junge Burschen wie wir. Und ab und zu haben wir ihnen dann eine Cola-Dosen geschenkt. Das hat es drüben nicht gegeben.
Warum hat man denn den eisernen Vorhang gebaut?
Die, wenn da drüben im Sozialismus gewusst hätten, wie gut es uns geht, wären die alle rübergekommen.
Bayern, Tschechoslowakei, Bayern, Tschechoslowakei.
Meinst du, ihr habt das nicht gemerkt? Meinst du, ich bin blöd oder blind oder was?
Jetzt hör auf, reiß dich zusammen, der Klaus.
Der Klaus, der hat das schon längst kapiert. Der ist kein Kind mehr.
Macht einen Sonntagsausflug.
Die Tschechei.
Passt bloß auf, dass euch nichts passiert.
Er glaubt wohl immer noch an den Kalten Krieg.
Du wirst sehen, wir machen uns heute einen ganz tollen Tag. Wahnsinn. Wo gehst du denn hin?
Ich mach trotzdem See.
Hej ty! Nevíš, jestli už nejsou 3 hodiny? Můj táta pracuje v kiosku do 3 a pak mě odveze k mámě.
Was? Halb 3. Half 3.
Díky. Chceš? Bylo to, jako by za těma kopcema končil svět. A nikdo si nemohl představit, že by se to mohlo změnit. Teď najednou můžeš kamkoliv. Pořád mi to přijde nereálný.
Cool.
Helmut Kohl.
Helmut Kohl.
Matthäus.
Matthäus.
Klinsmann. Boris Becker. Hitler.
Martina Navratilova. Karel Gott.
Tak to se ti povedlo. To kolik chtěl, co má je, Karel Gott. Z něj každé ráno vylétává včelka Mája. Naše kamarádka včelka Mája. Máme jí co závidět z výšky, které vidí svět. To je můj táta. Už musím jít. Tak se měj.
Čau.
Tady máš suvenýr. Na svoji první cigaretu.
dich schon gesucht, wir wollen fahren.
Ich hab dir gesagt, du musst dir keine Sorgen machen. Der ist groß genug, der kann auf sich selber aufpassen.
Aber wir sind in einem fremden Land, das ist ganz was anderes. Da kann er sich ja gar nicht richtig verständigen.
So we all have to move. And here we are again for a very, very short Q&A. I'm very sorry to say, but we have time for a couple of questions. And if you want, you can also ask your questions in German. They will be translated. So are there any questions from the audience? Yes, please.
Yes, my English is not so fluently, so I would like to speak German. Seht ihr nicht auch einige Aspekte etwas kritischer an der EU? Also was jetzt so rüberkam, war ja alles wunderbar. Wir lieben Europa, können wir auch sagen, wir lieben China oder die USA oder Russland. Das kommt auf gleiche...
Wohnen wir aber nicht.
Ja, nur... Ich liebe meine Frau, aber ich liebe nicht unbedingt ein Land oder einen Staat, womit ich mich nur teilweise identifizieren kann. Worauf ich hinaus will, der internationale Ansatz ist natürlich lobenswert, aber wenn es ein eurozentristischer Ansatz ist, mit einer Mauer um Europa drumherum, dann wird es schon problematisch. Ich gehöre zu denen, die große Megastaaten nicht mögen, also USA, Russland, China, Europa, sind meiner Meinung nach demokratisch kaum kontrollierbar in ihrer Größe. Das sieht man an den...
fragen, was genau die
Frage ist, seht ihr nicht auch die demokratische Problematik bei der EU? Das Parlament hat keine richtigen parlamentarischen Rechte.
Ja, wir sehen sie.
Ja?
Das ist wirklich
also das würde ich aber auch mal sagen, weil sonst wird diese Sache ein bisschen unglaubwürdig, wenn man nur die schöne Seite zeigt und die negative, die dunkle Seite nicht.
Die Frage ist, your question was, do you see the problematic sides of the EU? And all I can say is, yes, I do. And I think everybody here does. And I think it's a Totschlag-Argument. You can wholeheartedly defend the European Union and its achievements without being blind to all its problems.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I mean, of course. There are no human endeavors which are perfect. I mean, I've never ever encountered any human endeavor which is without failure, without fault, without spats, without problems, without... It's true. But you have to remember that the idea of the nation state is a recent idea with a lot of problems. I mean, we've seen some problems with the idea of the nation state in the past century. You know, you could even say that it's the most horrific century in the entire history of humankind because of the idea of the nation state. I mean, you could argue that. So there are some problems with the nation state as well. So, and you have to remember that European culture as a civilization is much older than the whole idea of the nation state. Our culture is under it, is older, and is buried by the idea of the nation state. So instead of the discourse in which the European Union is superimposed on us, it's the other way around. You know, we have to free ourselves of the boundaries and the shackles of the 18th and 19th century idea, the deadly idea of the nation state. Mm-hmm. That's just how I would put it.
Very short. Yeah.
No,
maybe
just briefly.
Very short, and we can take one more question.
Very short. I don't think anybody here was talking about a wall around Europe. I think we are, in very different ways, inviting everybody to think and reflect about what can Europe be as a collective thing, and how can we develop this thing.
Yeah. One last question. Yes.
Thank you. How can art, though, or art institutions make themselves more open to a Europe that is kind of more multicultural and allows these people that see themselves as minorities to come to the center and have a voice? Because that seems like it doesn't really, you don't see that happening at very many German universities, for instance, or even in many German art institutions. And I don't know about the countries that you come from, but do you see that as a problem as well?
Yeah, it's a problem, but that's not. I mean, it's not a difficult answer to that. We in the Bali in Amsterdam, we program every single day of the year. We have a live happening program, and the editors in the Bali actively seek out pluriformality and people from every background, and you have to actively seek that. And if you're willing to do that, it's not that difficult because people want the stage, whether they have a background in Northern Africa or a background in LGBT communities, but you have to actively look for it. And it's a fact, and it might sound as a surprise, but if you ask a female professor to speak about her profession, she will, in a lot of times, will say, no, ask somebody else. And then you have to be prepared to ask her again and again. and say that no, we're asking especially you. So it's with women, it's with every background, it's with, you have to actively love pluriformality and diversity and seek it out. And then it's very easy, very easy.
Yeah, I would just ask, correct that I'm sitting here on behalf of 10 directors who did very different and diverse views on Europe, and some of them are quite critical towards also the state of Europe, which is currently endangered by social issues, etc. And some of them are more optimistic, or in my case, it was more like a retro optimism. Back then, the feeling of open borders. But all of them are the personal stories about Europe, and so there's no one attitude of us. Mm-hmm. We share the love to Europe, and loving can include also like fighting for and seeing also the critical stuff.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so sorry the time has run out already on us, and I invite all of you to ask more questions about the campaign, also about Eurolab. There were fantastic ideas there. Talk to Henriette, talk to Sebastian, watch the whole Love Europe project, and please stay involved, and most of all, please all go vote in May, 24th of May. And 26, sorry, I'm totally confused by all the dates and numbers. 26, please go vote. And thank you all for your attention, and thank you for this fantastic panel. Thank you so much.
Yeah.